Marcus stepped into the airport, carrying his small black suitcase. He had just returned from a long business trip in another city. The terminal was busy, filled with travelers rushing to catch their flights. The bright lights reflected on the shiny floors and the sound of announcements and rolling suitcases filled the air. Marcus walked calmly, his mind focused on getting home. At the security checkpoint, Officer Lewis noticed Marcus. Lewis was a tall man with a strict face. He had been working at the airport for years and had a reputation for being serious and sometimes harsh with travelers. Today he was on high alert because of a recent security warning. When he looked at Marcus, something about him made Lewis suspicious. "Sir, step aside, please," Lewis said loudly. His voice echoed across the terminal. Marcus looked at him calmly. "Excuse me, officer, is there a problem?" he asked politely. Lewis ignored the question. "Come with me," he ordered. He motioned toward a small holding area near the checkpoint. Marcus followed quietly. He had faced many unexpected situations before, but he knew that staying calm was always important. The crowd of travelers began to notice. Some stared with curiosity, and a few pulled out their phones to record what was happening. As Marcus walked, he asked again, "Officer, may I know why I am being asked to step aside?" Lewis didn't answer immediately. He was focused on following his protocol and did not want to explain to the public. He only said, "It's standard procedure. Follow me." The people around them were watching closely. Some whispered to each other. Some looked concerned because Marcus did not resist or act nervously. Instead, he walked confidently, holding his suitcase in one hand. His calmness made the officer feel uneasy. Marcus's calm attitude made it clear that he was not scared or hiding anything. Once they reached the holding area, Lewis gestured for Marcus to sit on one of the chairs. "Take a seat," he said. Marcus sat slowly, keeping his hands visible. He kept his eyes on the officer and quietly studied the room. It was a small, plain room with a few chairs, a desk, and a monitor showing the security cameras. After a few moments, Marcus spoke again. "Officer, I am willing to cooperate, but I would like to know why I am being held. This is my first time facing such a situation, and I want to understand." His voice was calm and polite. Lewis noticed that Marcus spoke like someone used to handling tense situations. The officer felt a small sense of doubt in his mind. Meanwhile, travelers outside the holding area were still watching. Some were shaking their heads, thinking the officer was overreacting. Marcus's calm presence contrasted with Lewis's angry and tense behavior. The more the officer tried to maintain control, the more uncomfortable he felt. Marcus's eyes did not show fear, only patience and quiet confidence. Marcus had a secret. He was not an ordinary traveler. He was an FBI agent returning from an important assignment. He had experience dealing with difficult situations, staying calm under pressure, and understanding human behavior. But Lewis had no idea. To the officer, Marcus was just another traveler being questioned. As Lewis walked around the room, trying to check Marcus's ID and bags, Marcus observed everything carefully. He noticed small details: the officer's movements, the cameras in the room, the positions of the chairs, and the reactions of people outside. Marcus knew that staying calm and cooperative would help the situation. Panicking or arguing could make things worse, and he wanted to resolve it peacefully. The holding area felt tense. Marcus did not speak much, only answering questions when necessary. He watched Officer Lewis closely and noticed how frustrated the officer was becoming. Marcus smiled slightly in his mind, knowing that he could handle the situation. He also knew that soon the misunderstanding would be cleared and everything would be resolved without conflict. People outside the room continued to watch. Some recorded videos on their phones, thinking the situation was unusual. Marcus's calm attitude and polite behavior made the officer appear nervous and unsure. For a moment, Lewis questioned whether he had acted too quickly, but he did not stop. He wanted to finish his job according to the rules he knew. Marcus sat quietly, thinking about how situations like this tested patience and self-control. He understood that misunderstandings happened, but how a person reacted to them showed their true character. Marcus remained confident that this situation would end soon. and he would continue his work without letting anger or frustration affect him. The terminal was buzzing with travelers, some hurrying to their gates and others waiting for their flights. The commotion seemed normal, but the small crowd gathering around Marcus and Officer Lewis was starting to draw attention. People whispered to each other, their eyes fixed on the scene. Some were curious, others looked concerned, and a few were already recording the situation on their phones. Marcus stayed seated in the holding area, his posture calm and confident. He did not raise his voice, he did not argue, and he did not panic. Every time Officer Lewis asked a question, Marcus answered politely. "Here is my identification," Marcus said, handing over his ID. "I am willing to cooperate in any way you need." His tone was calm, measured, and respectful. Officer Lewis examined the ID carefully. He was strict, and he liked to follow rules precisely. But something about Marcus seemed unusual. He looked calm while being questioned, confident without being arrogant. Lewis had dealt with travelers who panicked, lied, or tried to avoid rules. Marcus was different. The officer's own frustration began to grow because Marcus did not act scared, angry, or nervous. Outside the holding area, the crowd continued to watch. People whispered, "Why is he being held? He looks normal." Others murmured, "That officer seems too angry for no reason." Marcus noticed the crowd's attention, but he did not let it bother him. He knew the people outside could see only part of the situation, not the full reason behind the security measures. Marcus understood that staying composed was the best way to manage tension, both inside the room and in public. Officer Lewis asked Marcus to empty his pockets and place his belongings on the desk. Marcus followed instructions carefully. He laid out his wallet, keys, phone, and suitcase in an organized manner. He kept his hands visible at all times and looked at the officer directly in a calm, respectful way. Lewis examined everything, still unsure why he felt uneasy. "Sir, have you traveled recently?" Lewis asked. Marcus nodded. "Yes, I just returned from another city. It was a business trip. I had meetings and official work to complete, and now I am heading home." His voice remained steady and polite. As Marcus spoke, some travelers outside started whispering again. They noticed how polite and calm he was, and they compared him with the officer's angry tone. Some thought the officer might have overreacted. Others began to comment quietly to each other. "He seems harmless. Why is he being treated this way?" Marcus watched Officer Lewis closely. He observed every movement, every hesitation, and every glance. Marcus's experience as an FBI agent allowed him to remain alert without showing it. He understood that the officer's behavior came from stress and pressure, not personal dislike. Marcus stayed patient, knowing that acting differently would only make the situation worse. After a few minutes, Officer Lewis asked more questions about Marcus's travel and purpose at the airport. Marcus answered each question truthfully and clearly. "I am not hiding anything. I understand the rules, and I want to follow them," he said. His calmness made Lewis feel slightly guilty, though he tried to hide it. The officer wanted to maintain authority, but Marcus's composed manner made that difficult. Outside, the crowd had grown slightly. People were now filming with their phones, commenting on how the officer was handling the situation. Marcus noticed this but did not react to it. He understood that public attention could either escalate or de-escalate tension, depending on behavior. By staying polite and calm, he was quietly controlling the scene. Inside the holding area, time seemed slower. Marcus and Officer Lewis continued their conversation, and each moment added pressure on the officer. Marcus remained professional, showing no signs of anger, fear, or impatience. He only focused on cooperation and understanding, which made the officer increasingly aware of his own mistakes. The airport staff began to notice the tension. Some staff members whispered to each other, unsure if they should intervene. Marcus remained composed, quietly signaling through his body language that he was not a threat. His calmness created a subtle contrast with Officer Lewis's visible frustration. By the time a few minutes passed, it was clear that the situation had drawn significant public attention. Marcus remained the same, calm, polite, and in control of his emotions. The crowd outside continued to watch, some recording, some whispering, and some simply observing the unexpected scene. Marcus's presence and behavior quietly shifted the energy of the room, making it less about suspicion and more about patience, observation, and understanding. Marcus remained seated in the small holding area, his posture calm and his hands resting neatly on his lap. He had answered Officer Lewis's questions carefully, and his tone stayed polite and steady. While the officer checked Marcus's identification and documents, Marcus quietly observed the room. He noticed every detail: the position of the chairs, the small security cameras in the corners, and the way the officer moved nervously from one side to another. To any ordinary traveler, Marcus looked calm and cooperative, almost unbothered by the situation. But in truth, he was far from ordinary. Marcus was an FBI agent, and he had just returned from an important assignment that required him to remain undercover. He had spent weeks in another city, gathering information and carefully avoiding any attention. Now, unexpectedly, he found himself in a situation where he was the one being questioned. The realization that Officer Lewis had no idea about Marcus's true identity brought a small, private smile to his face. Marcus understood that this was a test in its own way, a test of patience, observation, and control. He knew that how he handled this moment could determine whether it became a minor misunderstanding or a tense confrontation. Meanwhile, Officer Lewis grew increasingly frustrated. The officer had expected resistance, confusion, or at least some nervous behavior. Instead, Marcus sat calmly, answering questions clearly and showing no sign of fear. Lewis did not know how to respond. The more he tried to maintain control, the more uneasy he felt. Marcus's calm and collected demeanor seemed to highlight the officer's own lack of confidence in the moment. Outside the holding area, the crowd had grown slightly larger. Travelers whispered to each other, commenting on the unusual scene. Some recorded videos with their phones, while others simply observed quietly. Many of them noticed how calm Marcus was compared to the officer's tense and sharp movements. To them, Marcus seemed completely in control of himself, even while being publicly questioned. Inside, Marcus considered his options carefully. He knew revealing his identity immediately could cause confusion, and might even escalate the situation. Instead, he decided to wait for the right moment, observing the officer's behavior and the reactions of the people nearby. Marcus's training as an FBI agent had taught him to stay calm under pressure and to control a situation without using force. This was another opportunity to use that training in a real-world setting. As Officer Lewis continued his questioning, Marcus answered every question politely and clearly. "I understand that you are following protocol," Marcus said. "I am happy to cooperate. Can you please clarify what triggered this review?" His tone was calm and non-threatening, but it carried the quiet authority of someone who was used to being in command. Lewis paused, feeling the weight of Marcus's presence. The officer had dealt with many travelers, but few had this kind of composed energy. Marcus's calm eyes met Lewis's, and for a brief moment the officer felt unsure of his own authority. He wanted to assert control, but he also sensed that Marcus was not just an ordinary traveler. At that moment, Marcus's colleague, who worked at a nearby federal office, walked into the terminal. She had recognized Marcus immediately and knew that he was being held by mistake. Quietly, she approached the holding area and spoke to another staff member, explaining Marcus's true identity as an FBI agent. She asked them to ensure that the situation was handled carefully and that the officer was informed without causing public alarm. Marcus continued to sit quietly, aware of his colleague's presence but not revealing any reaction. His calm demeanor remained intact, showing patience and professionalism. Inside the holding area, the tension was slowly beginning to shift. Officer Lewis still did not know Marcus's identity, but he could sense that this was no ordinary traveler. The small crowd outside continued to watch, unaware of the secret that Marcus carried. To them, it was simply a tense airport scene. To Marcus, it was a moment to demonstrate patience, observation, and self-control. He understood that actions taken calmly and wisely could prevent unnecessary conflict. As minutes passed, Marcus remained composed, waiting for the right moment to reveal his true identity. He had no fear and no anger, only a quiet confidence that came from experience, training, and understanding the importance of staying calm under pressure. Marcus remained seated in the holding area, his posture straight, his hands resting calmly on his lap. He continued to observe Officer Lewis carefully, noticing every small movement, every hesitation, and the subtle way the officer shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Marcus had been in tense situations before, but this one was unusual because it was happening in public, with dozens of people watching. Officer Lewis was frustrated. He had expected some resistance or nervous behavior, but Marcus remained calm and cooperative. Every question the officer asked was answered politely and clearly. "Yes, I traveled to another city for business. I had meetings and appointments, and now I am heading home," Marcus replied in a steady voice. His calm tone and polite manner made Lewis feel more uneasy. The officer had been trained to control situations, but he had never encountered someone who handled authority with such quiet confidence. Outside the holding area, travelers continued to watch. Some whispered to each other, commenting on the scene while others recorded videos on their phones. The crowd was growing, and everyone could see that Marcus remained composed despite being publicly questioned. His calm attitude contrasted sharply with the officer's tense and sharp movements, making the situation look more dramatic than it was. Marcus knew that remaining calm was the best way to handle the tension. He understood that showing impatience, anger, or frustration could make the situation worse. He took slow, steady breaths, listening carefully to every question, observing every detail in the room. He noticed the small security camera in the corner, the placement of the chairs, and the way Officer Lewis's eyes shifted whenever someone outside the room moved. Lewis asked Marcus to empty his pockets and place all belongings on the desk. Marcus followed the instructions carefully, laying out his wallet, phone, keys, and suitcase in an organized manner. He kept his hands visible at all times, showing he had nothing to hide. His calm presence made the officer feel slightly guilty, though Lewis tried to hide it. He wanted to maintain control, but Marcus's professional and composed behavior made it difficult. Marcus's colleague from the federal office had arrived nearby. She quietly informed another staff member about Marcus's identity as an FBI agent and asked that the situation be handled carefully. Marcus noticed her presence but did not react. He remained calm, knowing that his quiet demeanor would help prevent any unnecessary conflict. Inside the holding area, the tension was still high, but Marcus's calm behavior was slowly influencing the officer. Lewis had begun to notice that his own frustration and impatience were visible to the public, and he felt uneasy about how he appeared. Marcus's polite answers and steady demeanor made the officer question whether he had overreacted. "Sir, I understand you are following protocol," Marcus said politely. "I am happy to cooperate. Could you please explain what triggered this review?" His tone was calm, respectful, and patient. The officer paused for a moment, unsure how to respond. Marcus's words were simple, yet they carried the quiet authority of someone who knew how to handle tense situations. Outside, the crowd remained attentive. Some travelers whispered, "He seems so calm. The officer looks nervous." Others filmed videos, commenting quietly to each other. Marcus's composed behavior was gradually changing public perception. People started to see him as confident and trustworthy, while the officer's tension became more noticeable. Marcus remained alert but did not show it. He knew that how he behaved could influence not only the officer, but also the crowd outside. By staying calm, he was quietly controlling the situation, demonstrating patience, professionalism, and self-control. He understood that appearances mattered, and his composed presence reassured those watching that no danger existed. Minutes passed, and the small holding area remained tense. Marcus continued to answer questions politely, following instructions carefully and maintaining his calm demeanor. Officer Lewis was growing more aware of Marcus's confidence, realizing that his own frustration was unnecessary. Marcus's quiet patience and professionalism made it clear that he was not an ordinary traveler. By the end of the conversation, it was evident that Marcus's calm approach had changed the dynamic of the room. The officer, though still uneasy, began to see that this situation could be resolved peacefully. Marcus's quiet confidence had created a space where misunderstanding could be corrected without anger or conflict. Marcus sat quietly in the small holding area, his calm presence filling the room. He observed Officer Lewis closely, noticing the subtle signs of frustration and doubt on the officer's face. The more Marcus stayed composed, the more uneasy Lewis became. Marcus understood that patience was the most effective tool in this situation. By remaining polite and collected, he could prevent unnecessary conflict and quietly take control of the scene. Officer Lewis continued to check Marcus's documents and belongings. He looked at the ID, passport, and boarding pass multiple times, trying to confirm his suspicions. Marcus answered every question politely without hesitation. "Yes, I returned from a business trip," he said calmly. "I have all my documents here and I am happy to cooperate." His tone remained steady, showing neither fear nor irritation. Outside the holding area, a small crowd had gathered. Travelers whispered to each other, some filming videos, others simply watching the unusual scene unfold. Many were surprised by Marcus's calm behavior, especially in contrast to Officer Lewis's tense and strict manner. Some people commented quietly, "He seems very calm. Why is the officer acting like this?" Others wondered if there had been a misunderstanding. Inside the room, Marcus noticed a familiar figure entering quietly. It was his colleague from a nearby federal office. She recognized Marcus immediately and understood that this situation was a mistake. She approached another staff member and quietly explained that Marcus was an FBI agent, returning from an assignment. She requested that the officer be informed carefully without alarming the public or escalating the situation. Marcus noticed his colleague but remained seated calmly. He did not react outwardly, knowing that showing relief or emotion could change the dynamic in the room. He understood that his calm demeanor was helping to manage both the officer and the public perception. Every gesture, every word, and every glance he made was measured and purposeful. Officer Lewis, still unaware of Marcus's true identity, grew more cautious. He had expected resistance or confusion, but Marcus remained cooperative and composed. The officer began to realize that he might have acted too quickly, although he did not admit it aloud. Marcus's professional behavior quietly reminded Lewis that appearances could be misleading. Marcus continued to answer questions with clarity and politeness. "I understand you are doing your job, officer," Marcus said. "I want to cooperate fully, but I would appreciate understanding the reason for this review." His voice was calm, respectful, and firm without being confrontational. Lewis paused, feeling the weight of Marcus's composed presence. For the first time, he wondered if he had misjudged the situation entirely. Outside the room, the crowd had grown slightly. Travelers commented on Marcus's calm behavior, some whispering, "He is handling this very well." "The officer looks tense." Others continued filming, realizing that the scene was unusual and that Marcus's patience stood out. The contrast between the calm man and the anxious officer was noticeable to everyone watching. Marcus quietly observed Officer Lewis's reactions, noting how the tension began to shift. The officer's movements became slower and more careful, as if he was second-guessing his own actions. Marcus knew that maintaining composure could change the outcome of the situation. By remaining polite and cooperative, he gave the officer a chance to correct the misunderstanding without conflict. Minutes passed, and the holding area remained tense but controlled. Marcus stayed alert, following the officer's instructions, answering questions clearly, and keeping his calm demeanor. He did not show impatience or frustration, even as the public watched. His professionalism and quiet confidence created a sense of order in the room, quietly influencing both the officer and those nearby. Finally, Marcus's colleague prepared to approach Officer Lewis directly to reveal his identity. Marcus remained seated calmly, observing the subtle changes in the officer's behavior. He knew that soon the situation would be clarified, and he would be able to leave without confrontation. His patience, careful observation, and professional calm had already prevented the misunderstanding from escalating. Marcus's calm presence in the holding area had become a quiet force. While the officer initially controlled the situation, Marcus's composed demeanor slowly began to influence him. The room, once tense and uncertain, now had a sense of quiet control, guided by Marcus's patience and professionalism. The small holding area was quiet except for the soft rustling of papers and the occasional beep from a nearby monitor. Marcus remained seated, his posture straight and his hands resting calmly on his lap. His eyes were steady, observing Officer Lewis as the officer continued to check documents and ask questions. Marcus's calm presence made the officer feel uneasy. Lewis had expected resistance, but Marcus remained cooperative, polite, and confident. As Marcus answered questions with clear and polite responses, his colleague quietly approached the officer. She spoke softly but firmly, explaining that Marcus was not an ordinary traveler. "Officer Lewis, you need to know something," she said. "This man is an FBI agent returning from an assignment. He is authorized and trained, and there has been a misunderstanding." Lewis froze for a moment, his eyes widening. He looked at Marcus, then back at the colleague. His mind raced as he tried to process what he had just been told. The realization sank in slowly. He had publicly questioned and detained an FBI agent without knowing it. Lewis felt a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and relief all at once. Marcus, still calm, simply nodded at the officer. He did not react with anger or frustration. His eyes were steady, his tone polite, and his body language relaxed. To anyone watching, Marcus looked as if he had been in control the entire time, and in truth, he had been. Marcus's quiet confidence and patience had prevented the situation from escalating, even when it had drawn the attention of the public. Outside the holding area, travelers were still observing. Some whispered to each other, noting the tension in the room. Others recorded videos, unaware that the situation had just shifted dramatically. Marcus's calm behavior had not gone unnoticed. People watching could see that he was composed, respectful, and in control, even as the officer appeared nervous and uncertain. Lewis swallowed hard, realizing the mistake he had made. I did not know," he said quietly, almost to himself. He had been so focused on protocol that he had not considered the possibility that Marcus was someone trained to handle high-pressure situations. The officer's strict demeanor softened slightly as he looked at Marcus, noticing the calm confidence that had carried him through the entire encounter. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. "I understand that this was a misunderstanding, Officer Lewis. I am happy to cooperate, and I respect your role here. Now that we are clear, we can resolve this quickly and professionally." His words were polite, respectful, and direct. They carried authority without being threatening. The officer nodded, still a little embarrassed but relieved. "I apologize for the misunderstanding," Lewis said. "I did not know your identity. I appreciate your cooperation and patience." Marcus acknowledged the apology with a slight nod, maintaining his composed demeanor. Outside, the crowd began to notice a change. Some travelers whispered, "It looks like he is someone important." Others recorded quietly, sensing that the situation had been clarified. Marcus's calm and professional conduct had shifted the entire mood. The tension in the room, once thick, began to ease. Marcus's colleague stayed nearby, ensuring that everything proceeded smoothly. She made sure that Officer Lewis understood the importance of handling the rest of the situation carefully and respectfully. Marcus observed everything quietly, still composed, knowing that the public perception and the officer's behavior were now under control. Lewis took a deep breath, regaining his composure. He looked at Marcus with a newfound respect. The officer realized that calmness, patience, and professionalism could make a huge difference in tense situations. He had seen it firsthand. Marcus's behavior had turned a potentially serious misunderstanding into a peaceful resolution, without conflict or anger. Finally, Marcus was free to move. He thanked Officer Lewis politely for his cooperation and professionalism. The officer returned the gesture, still slightly embarrassed but clearly relieved. The misunderstanding had been corrected, and the airport staff had witnessed the professionalism and patience that Marcus had demonstrated throughout the situation. Marcus stood, picked up his suitcase, and smiled slightly at the officer. "Thank you," he said calmly. "I hope this serves as a learning moment for all of us." Lewis nodded, understanding the message. Marcus had handled everything with grace, patience, and authority, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed the scene. After the revelation, the atmosphere in the holding area slowly shifted. Marcus remained calm, still seated, his posture straight, exuding quiet confidence. Officer Lewis, who had moments ago been tense and uncertain, now looked embarrassed but relieved. He had just realized that he had publicly questioned an FBI agent without knowing it. Lewis's strict demeanor softened, and he tried to find the right words to apologize. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding," Lewis said quietly. His voice was sincere and his eyes showed genuine regret. Marcus nodded politely, "I understand," he said calmly. "It is important to follow the rules, but sometimes mistakes happen. I am glad we can resolve this peacefully." His words were measured, respectful, and kind, showing patience and professionalism. Outside the holding area, travelers who had been observing began to whisper excitedly. Some had recorded videos of the incident, and now they realized that the man in the videos was an FBI agent. A few people murmured to each other, "I can't believe he stayed so calm. That was impressive." Others discussed how tense the officer looked before learning Marcus's identity. The incident quickly became a topic of conversation, but Marcus's composed behavior remained the focus. Marcus's colleague stayed nearby, ensuring that everything continued smoothly. She explained to Officer Lewis the importance of carefully handling situations like this in the future. Marcus listened quietly, still calm, observing the officer's reaction. Lewis nodded thoughtfully, clearly absorbing the lesson. Marcus's quiet patience had not only resolved the misunderstanding, but also taught a valuable lesson about handling tense situations with care. The officer and Marcus then moved to a quieter corner of the airport. Away from the growing crowd, Lewis spoke again, this time more confidently. "Thank you for your cooperation and patience. I can see now that you handled everything very well. I learned something important today." Marcus smiled slightly. "It is always better to stay calm and polite even in tense moments. People notice behavior more than words," he replied. The public attention began to ease as Marcus prepared to leave the area. People who had been watching realized that the incident had ended peacefully. Many whispered their admiration for Marcus's composure. Even Officer Lewis felt a sense of relief. He had handled a delicate situation incorrectly at first, but Marcus's professionalism allowed the misunderstanding to end without conflict. Marcus gathered his belongings and adjusted his suitcase. He glanced at the small crowd outside, offering a polite nod to the travelers who had observed him. Some of them returned the gesture, impressed by the calm and composed manner in which he had handled the situation. Marcus's quiet confidence had left a strong impression on everyone who witnessed the event. Officer Lewis straightened his uniform, taking a deep breath. "I will make sure to handle situations more carefully in the future," he said. Marcus nodded, appreciating the sincerity in his words. The officer had learned a lesson about patience, professionalism, and observing before acting. Marcus's calm approach had turned what could have been a tense public confrontation into a teaching moment for the officer. As Marcus walked toward the exit, the airport staff approached him. They expressed their relief that the situation had been resolved peacefully. Marcus thanked them politely, maintaining his composed demeanor. His calm behavior and professionalism had not only resolved the misunderstanding but also demonstrated leadership, patience, and control under pressure. By the time Marcus reached the main terminal, the public attention had shifted to curiosity and admiration. People continued to talk about the incident, noting how he remained polite and calm despite the stressful situation. Marcus moved steadily toward his ride, keeping a composed and respectful manner. The crowd slowly dispersed and the airport returned to its usual rhythm. Before leaving, Marcus offered a final word to Officer Lewis. "Remember, patience and calmness make a difference. How we act in tense situations is remembered more than the tension itself." Lewis nodded, understanding the meaning clearly. Marcus's calm, polite, and professional approach had left a lasting impact, not only on the officer but also on the public who witnessed the event. The incident at the airport ended peacefully, leaving behind a lesson about patience, observation, and professionalism. Marcus walked away quietly, his calm demeanor unchanged, knowing that he had handled a potentially difficult situation with skill, patience, and grace. Marcus walked steadily through the airport, his suitcase rolling quietly behind him. The crowd that had gathered earlier had mostly dispersed, leaving only a few curious travelers who had witnessed the incident. Everyone who had watched Marcus noticed one thing clearly. He had remained calm, polite, and composed throughout the entire situation. His professionalism had left a lasting impression, not just on Officer Lewis but on all those who observed the encounter. Officer Lewis stood nearby, straightening his uniform. He had learned an important lesson about patience, observation, and understanding before acting. Though still slightly embarrassed, he felt relief that the misunderstanding had ended peacefully. Marcus had shown that remaining calm under pressure could prevent conflict Even in public situations, Lewis took a deep breath, grateful that the encounter had been handled professionally. As Marcus made his way to the exit, his colleague from the federal office walked beside him. "You handled that very well," she said quietly. "The way you stayed calm, polite, and professional really helped diffuse the situation." Marcus smiled politely. "It is always better to stay composed. Patience and understanding often solve problems faster than force or anger," he replied. Outside the airport, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the parking area. Marcus's car was waiting, and he loaded his suitcase into the trunk. He paused for a moment, looking back at the airport. The place that had been so tense earlier now seemed peaceful. The incident that had drawn attention and curiosity had ended without any harm, and Marcus's calm behavior had been the reason. The travelers who had recorded the incident were still talking among themselves. Some commented on how impressive Marcus's composure had been, while others reflected on how quickly Officer Lewis's mood had changed once the truth was revealed. It became clear that Marcus's calm and polite approach had not only resolved the misunderstanding, but also created a lesson for anyone who observed the event. Marcus got into the car, ready to continue his journey home. He thought about the incident, recognizing that misunderstandings could happen anywhere, even in a busy airport. What mattered most, he reflected, was how one reacted. Remaining calm, polite, and professional could prevent unnecessary conflict and leave a positive impression on others. Officer Lewis watched Marcus leave, silently reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He realized that authority should always be balanced with observation, patience, and understanding. Marcus's behavior had shown him that even in tense situations, calmness and professionalism were more powerful than anger or force. Lewis made a mental note to approach future situations with more care and patience. As the car drove away, Marcus thought about the people who had witnessed the encounter. He hoped they had seen not only the resolution, but also the importance of remaining composed in stressful situations. Sometimes, he reflected, small actions like patience and politeness could create a larger impact than expected. His calm approach had prevented a minor misunderstanding from becoming a serious problem, and had set an example for others to follow. When Marcus finally reached home, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had been long and stressful, but he had handled it with patience and professionalism. He had faced a challenging situation in public, managed to remain composed, and ensured that the misunderstanding ended peacefully. His calm approach had influenced the officer, reassured the public, and allowed him to leave the airport without conflict. Later, Marcus reflected on the lesson he had demonstrated. He understood that public encounters could test patience, observation, and composure. How one acted in such moments could influence not only the people directly involved, but also anyone watching. His calm demeanor, polite words, and professional conduct had turned a tense situation into a positive example for others. The incident at the airport became a quiet story of professionalism and patience. Marcus had handled a misunderstanding with skill, grace, and calm confidence. He knew that staying composed under pressure was a valuable trait in all situations, and he hoped that others would remember the importance of patience, observation, and understanding. Marcus finally relaxed, knowing that the situation was resolved and that he had demonstrated the value of calmness and professionalism. The airport incident, which had begun with tension and misunderstanding, ended as a lesson for everyone involved, leaving a lasting impression of composure, patience, and respect.